Hey, I'm Taylor. Now the Sheepish Goat. You're watching the channel. You ever make something without ever really having a plan as to where it's gonna go? I do sometimes. That's where this piece comes from. This is my latest art piece that I made without having any real plan as to what I was gonna make at all. That can be fun. That can be challenging. But that can surprise you. So let's talk about it. So this piece started out really simply with the idea of, I want to draw an attractive woman. That's all the motivation you need sometimes to pick up the pencil. This is a photo of Demona from Gargoyles that I drew a while back, and I actually have a video about this and a piece for Elisa that I did a joint video on very early on in the channel. I don't know if that really holds up anymore, but check it out if you're curious about the creation behind this piece. That all being said, this was the inspiration to start drawing. I like how this piece came out. I like Demona's design. I like the kind of wildness of the hair, the general feeling of the piece. This was my inspiration. I was looking through old artwork, saw this, and said, hey, I want to draw a pretty lady. So that's where it started. Now, where it went next was, okay, maybe I should draw a piece of fan art for something, because that's kind of typical of things that I'll draw on this channel sometimes. So I thought I would do Road to El Dorado and I would draw Chell, because everybody likes Chell. I started doing that, and that's where this goes. So this first bit of video starts out with a Road to El Dorado piece where I thought I would do Tulio, Miguel, and Chell. I quickly gave up on that and focused just solely on Chell. She's in a standing pose here, but I decided I want to push my posture. I want to push the expression of the character. I want to have a more dynamic angle and general scene. So I try to go with this forward-leaning shot, and I go for it for a little bit, but really what it comes down to is I'm dissatisfied. It's not working for me proportionally, even though I think in some cases watching it back, it's really not terrible. But I wasn't happy with it. And at the end of the day, Chell specifically really wasn't what I was after making. I figured that out at this point. So after that, I realized, yes, not Chell. Okay, I got it. But that same kind of Amazonian Mayan woman, I was like, I like that idea. I like the wild element. I like the animalistic, raw, natural kind of magnetism. That's kind of what I'm looking for. It doesn't have to be super seductive necessarily, which is kind of how Chell was starting with this pose. Wasn't really feeling it. So I said, okay, let's try a different, more dynamic pose that gets more animalistic body language into it. And that led us here. So here I kind of almost draw, it wasn't at first intentional, and then I went for it. I was thinking of Pocahontas specifically. There's scenes where she's kind of crawling through the woods, and I thought, okay, maybe that kind of like side shot would be an interesting choice for the character. This almost turned into kind of a Tarzan type pose, and I was like, okay, I want something crouched. I want something animalistic. I want it to be feminine, but I want to have that balance. I always like that balance of strength and beauty. I think it's really interesting and mesmerizing if you can strike that appropriately. So that's where I started with this next piece. I was like, okay, it's not Chell, it's not Pocahontas, it's not Tarzan, who, yes, he's not a woman, but you understand what I'm going for. So I get into this mode and I'm like, okay, maybe there's an Amazonian, maybe there's like a cave woman kind of energy that's gonna happen here that I think might be interesting to draw upon. So as you see, I'm drawing her here, and yeah, she's starting out like very strong, not very womanly necessarily, but I like kind of what's happening with the face. I liked her in this kind of crouch posture where she feels like you're just kind of stumbling across her, or she's caught in a moment, hiding or kind of peering through the woods. I like the idea of that. And that's where we really started to find out what I was going to draw. And again, this came forth naturally just from knowing what I didn't want. And in my life, that's a huge thing. If I don't know what I want to do, then start with what I don't want to do. And if I don't want to do it, then that gives me the direction of where to go next. So we get to this piece. And like I said, there's some nice things happening here. You could even draw on Atlantis a little bit. And I can't remember her name, but if you know it, tell me in the comments because you know who I'm talking about. But this is kind of the naturalistic pose for the woman here. And this is where we get to. What don't I like? Well, again, the shot isn't dynamic enough. I like her in a crouch posture, A+. I like her being kind of cave womany, wild, tribe, that kind of vibe, yes. I don't think we have enough room here in the scene to create a background, which I think would be appropriate for this, to kind of hide her amongst the brush, if you will. I think she's a little too masculine in the face, and I didn't really have any idea what I was going to do for clothing. Clothing I struggle with for sure. Right now I'm focused on pushing angles, pushing dynamic posing. I need to get better with a lot of things. Really, I do faces and bodies and I could improve. Hey, we all can improve, right? But that's where we're at. And I was like, okay, we're on the right track. We're not there. Let's start over one more time. So that gets us here. I was like, okay, I'm going to go very dynamic. I want her to be larger, but I want her to be more in a scene. I want to feel that energy. I kind of proceeded with the cave woman mentality. I was like, okay, cool. I'll have her kind of like crossed arm, really dynamic posing. I'll have her like holding like a staff maybe or something cool like that. But as you can see here, she's almost goblin-like. I kind of hunched her, foreshortened her so much, and it caused her head to be large. She looks like a child or like a goblin, like I said. And it kind of, I couldn't get back to the woman feel. So I do kind of end up bastardizing what's here. Like some of this is nice. I kind of like her face in this angle, but I rework it to get her in a more of a crouch posture that I had to the shot previous to this. You can see when I do my green line art, that's to help me understand the form. I lay that down to kind of do skeletal work so I can understand if I'm drawing it correctly. And I was like, I don't think it's working. So I get here in a crouch posture, and this is helping me to reestablish the angles of her shoulders and her hips to try to get that be a little more accurate and have her still dynamic, but maybe look a little more authentic and as far as proportions are concerned. So she's crouched here. We're starting to refine her face, and we're starting to see the character a little bit. I like that peering up kind of behind the hoods of her eyes look. I'm giving her the generic kind of bra. I do expand a little bit so it's not quite so cliche. And I worked to give her enough jewelry and pieces that made her feel a little bit unique while still being bland enough where it wasn't too distracting. I pulled on the kind of chunky hairstyle, almost mullet-like quality of Demona, which was the original piece I did that started the whole inspiration of this, because I really wanted to bring that in. I've now given her a necklace, and I've expanded the top to have some shoulders to it to make it a little bit more interesting. Right now I'm still figuring out the pose. This isn't set, but it's much, much closer. Tearing up sleeves, different things to just add more layers to make it look more interesting. If she's wild, if she's living in the woods, then who's to say her clothes are perfect? You can tell here, though, she's still a little bit too large. She's, as far as the whole scene itself. So I'm working on the character to start, and then I'll readjust her to give a little bit more room for background and the scene itself. So the trees and plants that are around her and in the composition. But you can say here I really get into the scene where I thought, okay, I had her arms up, I had her in a bunch of different poses, but I really like the idea of her being arms down, kind of shoulders back, holding it on her lap. It's like an inviting pose, but it's ready. So like it's like this tentative tenderness, if that makes sense, that I thought was really interesting. I'd say by the end of this, it's not like the favorite thing I've ever drawn. I think the whole piece could probably use one more revision, to be completely honest, to like really fine tune a character. But as like a base sketch or study in finding this character, I thought this was a really interesting process, and I like where it landed on. I just don't think it fully got there. For example, her right leg that's bent back with the foot is god awful. That foot should probably be much further back. It looks way too foreshortened for me, which I found, later on after I finished this piece, I realized that. But I went with a grass skirt, which was interesting. I did kind of two different types of leaves, tried to make those dynamic. That was something I had never really tried to do before, and I found that I liked it, how it came out in this piece. Something I was very aware of, too, is I really wanted this piece to have a very sketchy quality. I used a very sketchy brush when designing it because I really wanted that kind of raw, like I said, tribal, if you will, feel to the whole piece. I wanted it to feel not dangerous. That's not quite the right word. I just wanted to feel kind of naturalistic. So that was even as far as how I went about the brushes and the colors when we get into that. Not only did I not know what I was going to draw, but I let myself experiment with this a lot. I experimented a lot with how I colored it. I experimented a lot with the brushes. I added a lot in the way of texture, which you'll be seeing very shortly. But I even did like a sketchy quality like you might do with drawing on paper to give hues or values to different areas to show a little bit of darkness. It'll come up here very shortly. I'm just roughing in some of the trees now. I think they could be a little thicker going forward if I would have spent more time like on the plant life itself, but I'm pretty happy with how it came out. It's more than I would typically do for a piece, and that's, like I said, I wanted to push myself and do a lot of different things. But this is her. That's how she's looking so far. I think she has a nice natural vibe. I think I liked her nose better before I changed it right here. I don't think I like it as much at this point, but, it's what it is. I can't change it now. You let me know if you like her nose or not. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. We're just roughing out the rest of the line work here. Now we finally get into some shading, and I leave it real like rough and sketchy, like I said. I wanted it to look like it was kind of like a pencil or like a charcoal kind of feeling. We do overlay colors, obviously, but I tried to go for kind of almost like a watercolor feel. Like in my head, I didn't look at anything for direct inspiration, but in my head, I thought of maybe newspaper strips or like the Flintstones or like The Land Before Time. Those are the immediate gut reactions I'm feeling to what I was called to. But you see it a lot in certain media where like you go further into the distance and the hues of different things become more like purple and blue, and they kind of like fade off into the horizon. And I tried to capture that with this. You'll see it very shortly after I finish all these values. I tried to capture that. I've never done that before, but I thought it worked nicely with this aesthetic and with like her being like I said, kind of like a tribal woman. So let me know what you think about that. I thought it was really fun, and I really tried to experiment with that. As you can see here, she's pretty much all valued out. I have all the grayscale going on as the undertone, and it has a very, like I said, sketchy vibe to it. Now we're going in with some colors. You can see in the backgrounds there, I start adding some purples and greens, keeping it relatively muted as far as the background go. But you can tell there's a lot of transparency, so you can see the texture of the brush that I used to give all the actual black to white grayscaling. And that gives a lot of texture to the piece. So it, like I said, it kind of gives it a watercolor feeling where there's a lot of transparency and there's a lot of value shifts throughout like one thing, like a tree. And that's the piece. So let's look at it in totality here. So there's the final piece. As you can see, it has a lot of texture. I did it even on the trees and stuff. You can see there's a lot of like muddling going on to really kind of blend the colors together to make it feel dirty, to make it feel lived in, to kind of add, like I said, to the whole cave woman naturalistic feeling. This is all experimental for me. I really don't do this type of shading, but I thought it was a really fun challenge, and I thought it paired well with making a character without really planning out what I was going to do. Just very free form, very follow my instincts, see what comes out. So this is a really fun challenge. I really enjoyed it. Allowed me to try some new things, and I'm pretty happy with the results. So, hey, can't beat that, can you? So, hey, if you like the piece, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. If you've done something in your life that you started without having any real intention of where it was going and it turned out good, or it turned out bad, I'd love to hear about it because I think it's always a learning process. And I think it's always a fun point of reflection. So yeah, if you like the video, let me know. I would love to hear about it. But either way, until next time, everybody. See you then. Bye.